Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion on hybrid work and the playbook that is required for success. The future of work is now, and everyone is seeking out strategies to ensure their staff's hybrid experience is flexible, engaging, healthy. Hybrid programs need to address more than just scheduling time on the calendar. And today's program needs to coordinate and share working arrangements amongst employees, keep people connected and engaged, and ensure well-being for everybody. And that's what we'll be discussing today in our webinar hosted by HR Executive. I'm Kurt Monnier. I am the VP of Product here at ReturnSafe. I've been working at ReturnSafe for the last couple of years with our customers as they went hybrid due to the pandemic. In some cases, we're fully remote, and have really been on this journey with our customers as things have evolved from a focus on just keeping employees safe during the pandemic to really keeping employees engaged and connected and ensuring that companies have a great culture in these new times where companies are working in a hybrid working model. And I'm really pleased to be joined today by David Hughen, who is the founder and CEO of AustinWorkNet. David and I have known each other now for several months, and we've been working closely together. And I'm thrilled to have him here and have his expertise on the call today. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Kurt. Nice to be here. Looking forward to our discussion. I love this topic.
Yeah, me as well. So the focus of our discussion today is on optimizing hybrid for high performance. Hybrid might have came about out of necessity, but what we've really found is that hybrid is now can be the best possible working model, both for productivity, engagement, for culture, if you do it right. And to provide an effective hybrid experience, the companies that are doing it well are giving their employees effective, flexible working arrangements that work for their own schedules and lives, that create conditions for high performance, whether it's at home or in the office, that foster a culture of inclusion and aren't leaving anyone behind, no matter what their background or their circumstances. They're promoting well-being amongst their employees, keeping employees connected with each other, even though they might not be in the same physical location. And the companies that are doing this best are continually evolving their practices as well by looking at what's working, what isn't, and implementing changes as needed. And we've been really thrilled to be alongside our customers for that journey. So to kick things off, we thought we'd share some really interesting emerging market data that we've found and been analyzing. And so David and I will walk you through some of that and what we think it means. And then later on, we'll focus on some of the strategies that you can use to make sure that you have a great culture in a hybrid model. So we're going to share some very relevant information here from the most recent Working from Home Research Team survey. This survey of working arrangements and attitudes was started in May of 2020 in response to the dramatic impact that COVID-19 was making on working arrangements. And since then, it's been a monthly online survey being run jointly by University of Chicago, ITAM, MIT, and Stanford University. Each of these surveys collects between 2,500 and 5,000 responses, and the survey results are really highly regarded in the industry. You can see them for yourself at their website, wafhresearch.com. So David, as we can see in this chart here, the trend for in-office activities is slowly rising, but you expect that this trend is going to continue upward, or do you expect that it's now flattening out as companies settle into a hybrid working model?
I wish I had the clear guidance on where we think we're headed with this. I think that certainty is around the strong likelihood that organizations, for the most part, will not move fully back to people on site. But there will be exceptions to that because you have to go to the work to do the work in many companies and in many cases. But for those companies that have the flexibility of being able to work remote in order to get work done, we're going to show shortly that that's actually a very productive thing, and that's an attractive work condition. So I think companies out of a necessity have recognized that dynamic. And even though the graph shows they're inching towards return to work, I mean, the dramatic difference between returning to other conditions in which people show up and experience something. For work, you can experience work in a remote fashion and still be productive, engaged, and actually live possibly a more productive, balanced life. So we'll dig into that more as our discussion ensues.
Yeah, I've seen that as well with a number of our customers, and what's interesting is I think at the beginning of the pandemic, when many people were kind of forced to work from home, you still had that subset of employees that really had to be on site to be productive. For example, manufacturing type of use cases in factories. And what people have been evolving to now is not just having this company-wide policy for everyone necessarily, but recognizing that there are differences between different roles and putting in place working arrangements that really work best for each persona that works at the company. So even within a company, there may be some people that are fully on site, some people that are fully remote, and others that are hybrid. And I think this trend of it creeping upward is largely due to the fact that those folks that can be hybrid are able to now spend maybe more time in the office now than they were previously, but probably aren't ever going to go back, or shouldn't necessarily go back to a fully on-site model.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that, to the point you made a moment ago, now we have 2.5 years worth of data, and in this case, it's actually being tracked and trended. But if you think back to the first few months of the pandemic, remember when companies would say, okay, we'll be back to work fully June 1st. And then, no, we'll be back to work fully September 1st when school starts again, because it was a new condition. And we just assumed there would be an arc to the pandemic. There'd be a beginning, middle, and end. We'd get over it. We'd get back to life as we knew it. Now we're 2.5 years in, and we have so much learning, and we're starting to lock in on behaviors that in many cases have advantages. And we're going to explore those further shortly, but that's how a longer term experience in this setting has caused us to rethink what work means.
So as we were just talking about, right, not surprisingly, employers are increasingly shifting to this hybrid model because it's working, and in most cases is working better. So David, I'm curious to hear from your perspective and talking to leaders at the companies that you've been helping. How do leaders tend to feel about this cultural shift that happens when you move from being a predominantly in-office staff with an active social environment to one where maybe folks are only in the office 2 or 3 times a week, or in some cases not at all, and haven't met other than a virtual meetup?
Yeah, I mean, just on that topic of culture alone, it's an interesting time that we're in, and it points to the fact that this is an evolving topic. It's not a finished topic by any means, because companies are also realizing more than 2 years into this, they are missing out on how they distinguish their culture in certain cases, right? It used to be much more straightforward to say, we are a culture of inclusivity, and this is how we look, and we furnish all these cool, fun things to do while you're at work. All right, we feed you while you're at work. We have fun and games while you're at work. So what does culture now mean in this sort of modified work place and home work setting? And how do we set ourselves apart in that regard? So this is a puzzle piece that a lot of companies have not been able to fit back into this emerging reshaping of work. So that's a dilemma for companies to sort out. And just to the chart itself, we can see this implied continued upward climb that almost gives the sense that, well, we'll go from 2.3 days now to 2.5 days in a couple of months, and then 3 days and so forth. My sense is that we're moving towards a leveling off, where there is this blend of work from home and work on site. And now we're getting more maturity around what those guidelines look like, and how companies and teams and individuals are striking the right balance for how it made sense for their unique work environment. And I'll just add one other thing. You've heard me talk about this, Kurt, is that each organization is so different in responding to how work comes into the organization, gets acted upon within the organization, and then moves out of the organization. And just speaking in simple terms, let's say you manufacture a widget. the work order comes in, you're on site to complete that work order by touching the widget, putting all the parts together, and then you ship it on the other side. Those dynamics imply that people have to go there to do that work. Now, there could be a surrounding infrastructure of people supporting those efforts, and they may have the luxury of optional on-site or not on-site. But that's just one of many examples in which the way work enters and exits can make a determination. The other extreme could be we're a software company, and so we code things. And if we code things, we're probably interfacing with a computer primarily, and then occasionally with my teammates. And one could argue virtually all of that can be done in a remote setting. So that's why this chart is trying to find its leveling off point, is in part because of the distinctions on where and how work, in some cases, needs to be performed.
Yeah, there's I think both the needs to and then the want, how it wants to be performed as well. Right. One of the things that I've heard from a lot of customers is that there may be jobs where you can be fully productive working remotely, but depending on the persona of the person doing the work, maybe it's a younger employee. I've heard a lot that the Gen Z employees really prefer to go into the office, right? That's a big part of their social life, if you will, and connecting with their coworkers. So it's there's the factor of what is the work and where can it be done, and then also what's really best for the mental health of your employees and going to make them feel included in the culture.
Very fair point, and that's the nuance. One of many nuances about this topic is that, for some people, just speaking generically, they may be wired that they want to go to a workplace, cross a threshold, and meet other people who have this shared intention of doing work, whether they have to be there or not. They're just kind of wired for that. They want to go there and be part of that social setting and work at a place where they have a defined, personalized place in which they do that work. And then when they leave it, they cross the threshold again, and then they want to live a life outside of work. Now, plenty of people are wired that way. We know that fewer and fewer people are actually wired that way. There's a lot of people who just, on a 24-hour basis, they're in and out of their work because that's just the way they're able to do it, and they prefer to do it because they're living bits and pieces of their life with their kids or other interests that they have, and then they're back into the work in the middle of the night, possibly, and they're in the most productive setting for them to get things done. So there is that recognition that where and how work gets done needs to be taken into account. I'll add one other thing, Kurt, if I may, and that is this careful notion around, and this is our cautionary tale for those listening in who are in leadership capacities, that to be able to force people to work in certain situations now where they have options is not necessarily creating a condition of inclusiveness. That for some people, if they have this heavy-handed sense of where and how work needs to be done, people will pull away, and in all likelihood, they'll be less engaged, less trusting, not provide their best work, their most creative, initiative-driven type of work. So part of our challenge here is how do we create that balance so that people feel like, yeah, I love the way work is presented to me now, and this is where I want to be. This is a employee retention consideration.
So another interesting aspect of the survey has been looking at what are the key benefits of being in the office that employees have reported. As you can see here, face-to-face collaboration is the biggest one. Socializing and having good boundaries between work and personal life are the next two on here. What do you feel, David, that employees who are fully remote are kind of missing out on with that remote life? And what about employers as well?
Yeah, well, we talked a moment ago about that distinguishing of our culture is better for the following reasons. Well, if everyone is remote, how do you reinforce a culture? It's got to come through other ways. The quality of the leadership, the mission of the company, the nature of the work itself has got to be cool, and I love the work that I'm doing. So there are additional definers, some of them have always been around, but they need to be reinforced more and more to ensure that companies make it seem like this is still a great place to be, even though, as you've noted on the slide here, it's not for the free bagels. They're doing it for other, what I sometimes refer to as believership reasons. I sometimes refer to healthy companies as people are high believers, right? There's this high believership because we love what we do. We love the mission of the company. I trust my boss. I'm doing cool work. That's a great formula if it all comes together. But then if you add on a pandemic and other social ills and this sense of discomfort with what's happening around people, in addition to how work may or may not present itself, that creates a challenge. But this goes further to what we were just talking about, is in terms of why people want to show up or not show up is dependent on a number of different variables. And in this chart, I think speaks to why people would choose to come to work to some degree, right? That human element, right? This is where community of work and workers is established, right? I want to be around others in this fully realized human condition. I've shared with you guys that one of my client companies has only been around during the time of the pandemic. They formed right around the time the pandemic started, so everyone's remote. So this early to mid-stage startup has been successful. They've been building out their operations, their team, and they asked me to facilitate their first offsite, the first time they were all coming together from all over the country. And they met in Austin, where I'm based out of, and we had a full day session. And by the end of just the half day, people were actually teary-eyed because this was the first time they had come together with these formed relationships, but those relationships were all through, remote, digitized fashion. So here they were live and in person. They realized someone's taller than they thought they were or whatever, but they were just emotionally taken with the fact that this was so important for them to be together. But they formed this company by saying, we can accommodate you wherever you are. But there's a trade-off, and that is that it makes it harder to have that rich reconnection of face-to-face contact. That's the challenge I think a lot of companies are facing. They've been accommodating because there's this demand for people year in, year out. During the pandemic, there's been more work than people. So companies desperately have tried to pull in talent. And in part, they've done it by accommodating, no matter where you live, you can work here. The trade-off is just what I'm describing.
Yeah, and this data really highlights to me that even for those jobs where you can be fully remote, there are still benefits for, at least on occasion, being in the office with your coworkers. And if that's not possible, then it's really incumbent upon the company to put the correct tooling, right, and culture in place to replace some of these things that happen in person with the same types of connections and socializing that is happening, but being able to do it remotely.
Yeah, I mean, if employees just occasionally come in, I was at a client side yesterday, and I was talking with the head of HR on site in a conference room that was easily available, by the way. Remember back in the day where you would just sort of have a land grab to try to find a conference room that was available? It's much different now. But anyway, we were talking about the spookiness factor of coming to a work site. Your typical work site with cubes and so forth where people work, or whatever the shape and look of it. And if only, say, 20% of people are coming in occasionally, then it's spooky because they keep the lights off. Well, I have the lights on in a primarily unused space. And so occasionally you turn a corner and run into someone. And it's so weird. And this big empty space just, again, the term that was used in our meeting was, this is a spooky environment. Whereas we knew that a couple of years ago, it was so vibrant and active, and they would feed off each other's energy. I kiddingly, but meaningfully, I would say I can tell a lot about a company by its hallway culture. right? You walk through and you get a sense, do people laugh easily? Is there an energy of work surrounding it? You just have this sense of positivity. That's lost now. It's a trade-off.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that the benefits of spending at least some time in the office are clear, and there's also some really interesting data on the benefits of spending some time remotely.
Oh yeah, and just a final thought while we're on this slide is that, people used to put definition of work around their physical work setting, which included, if you had a cube or an office, you had pictures of family and you had dead plants and whatever else you would put in your work setting, and you personalized it. It seems like a lot of people have moved away from that and realized, I don't need that. I have a personalized space at home, which gives me plenty of definition. So I'm seeing that as an interesting dynamic as well.
So let's take a look at some of the data around the really meaningful benefits of doing remote work. And I think what's really crucial for some leaders who might be skeptical of a hybrid or a remote model to understand is that people truly are more productive in many cases when they are remote, at least part of the time. I think everyone saw Elon Musk's tweet the other day about how Tesla employees who don't want to come back to the office can pretend to work somewhere else, and that's really nonsense and is not based in reality or in the data. Hope I don't get Elon tweeting at me now. But as you can see here, the people that are working remotely, even if it's just 1 or 2 or 3 days a week, they're saving a ton of time just from the commute. And I think there's additional time saved from being able to spend less time getting ready and so forth. And a significant portion of the time is being spent working more on the job. So it equates to about 30 minutes of extra working on the job per day, which is really meaningful. I mean, over the course of a month, or a month, that's about 660 more minutes, so 11 hours per month of work that is being done just by allowing people to work remotely.
Yeah, I think this is where you can go to the resistant, curmudgeonly CFO and say, we've got some real data here to point to that we're going to be more productive as an organization, which means that we'll be more competitive because we are actually producing more. So what senior leader wouldn't want a greater return on their typically highest fixed cost asset, which is, in point of fact, their people. So how do we create conditions in which you get more return on your most significant fixed cost investment? Here's an example of where that can take on true meaning. And we also know, we've been alluding to this, most folks who've operated in this environment want this environment, and thus this is an attraction and retention element. This is what people have found is the right balance for them fully, totally, as a person, is to be able to balance work and how I define myself outside of just doing the work.
And the skeptical CFO, I think, should not just pay attention to the portion of this that's spent on doing extra work, but really needs to also understand that the portion of this time being spent on more personal things is actually really important to employees. There's another study recently, I think it was around $5,000 or so that people would like. They'd rather have a hybrid working policy than a $5,000 raise on average. And so these benefits that are made more personal in nature are still valuable to the company, even if you're just looking at your bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, this is where you can redefine for HR leaders. You can put a bit of an expanded definition on this often used term of total rewards. This is part of a total reward solution because in a way, this is a broad accommodation. It's an expanded benefit. and it has this sort of stickiness of commitment associated with it, as I alluded to just a moment ago. So this warrants serious consideration, but it also, as we've been talking about, means that leaders have to be operating with an appreciation for this. And we'll talk further about tone from the top in a moment.
So let's talk a bit about now what are leaders worried about if they do go to a hybrid model. So the benefits of hybrid are I think clear, but there's some valid concerns that need to be addressed. And let's I think a few of the key ones that have surfaced from my conversations, and I think from your conversations as well, David, have been how do we ensure that we have the culture that we want if people are partially remote? How are we ensuring collaboration and innovation? How are we making sure that we're factoring in employee well-being? And then from an HR leader's perspective, pretty similar, right? Like HR, I think one of their key responsibilities is making sure that a company has a great and vibrant culture. And so they've been really responsible in many cases for adjusting that to support a hybrid workforce.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very powerful slide, and it does point, I think, to the real and constant hand-wringing, we'll say, that's going on around how to make this work and what are the potential exposures, risk factors, and other considerations that are still hanging out there. We talked about culture, engagement, and morale. No surprise that it bubbles to the top on the CEO side. And I'll just reinforce this in the sense that when it's human nature, when left alone with the absence of any meaningful communication, humans can just think dark thoughts. So leaders have to be very actively involved in their work with their teams to create conditions in which people feel well-fed with the necessary communication, the tools, the resources, the advocacy, so they can work in these remote types of conditions, creating a sense of team and a sense in which people can define themselves through their team relationships and company relationships at large are critical. And that helps reinforce that culture, engagement, morale item that's at the top. I think it's also worth noting that when it comes to collaboration, there's a lot of creative ways in which people can collaborate remotely because we have the tools now. I mean, think about this. We often talk about what if this had happened 10 or 15 years ago? We just didn't have the tools or the means to be able to collaborate and be innovative in a remote fashion. There's ways in which we can do that now, but there's also the balance in which you do want to have those anchor days to come on site with your team so that you can do live real-time collaboration, not only within your team, but it could be there's another team in which you do a lot of handoff work with, and you both agree, both teams, that we'll be in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we'll be able to collaborate with each other in that way. And that can reduce some of the issues around well-being, fatigue, safety. And so we should talk about that a bit as well, if I could.
Yeah. So as you were mentioning, David, this stuff, getting the stuff right really matters, right? Because when you get it right, it's going to help you to attract and retain the top talent. It's going to help you create a highly engaging and performant culture. And of course, can't lose sight of the fact that maintaining a healthy and safe workplace is a crucial component of this as well. Making sure that whether people are in the office or remote, that they're safe and healthy, and that can both mean physical health, such as from COVID, but also mental health as well is an important factor here. Are you seeing these as key priorities at the organizations you're working with?
Yeah, I just touched on it in our last slide, and this is very much an emerging item as well. We know this socially, that the case of mental health wellness is very real and is more of an open discussion topic that we're we're grappling with, but it's more mainstream now. What I mean by that is that it's not a representation of someone's having less of capability or less of character, dealing with difficult issues in terms of where someone is, in terms of their mental health at points along the way, is very much a natural part of the human condition. And that, of course, enters into the workplace. So the challenge for organizations is somehow to balance the fact that they don't want to be personally intrusive, yet they need to be highly empathetic and create conditions in which people have a chance to have their own form of recovery in ways that companies can either provide services, support, and help with, and at the very least, they can provide very empathetic and authentic leadership to be available as a support mechanism among other support mechanisms for employees. This is very real and is also a differentiator in terms of employer of choice conditions.
So let's talk about some of the emerging best practices that the companies who are getting this right are putting in place to address these challenges and ensure they have a great hybrid experience for their employees. The first thing that really stands out to me is that just like with any other important initiative, it's imperative that you set goals, track progress, and measure the results so that you can adjust things where needed. So David, every company is so different. How are you seeing people define and measure these goals for their company?
Well, in the simplest way, it's, are we as productive or more so in the key metrics that matter for our company or for our critical elements of our operations? So those are simple, available, and historically recognized metrics. Now, in terms of program success, if we want to call hybrid a program, I'd suggest that it's more of how things get done in the workplace now. If nothing else, you have to ask those employees who are operating in a remote hybrid condition, how are they experiencing that? Are they getting the support they need? What's working and what's not? So that's a natural starting point, is to simply ask.
And to that point, David, one of the things that I've seen amongst my customers that are really taking this seriously and getting it right is that they're not just looking at it from the perspective of HR or from the desires of the CEO, right? They're really taking into account the needs of the various personas at the company, whether that's their employees who really want to be in sync with their teammates and be able to share their working arrangements with their teammates and collaborate with them on when they're coming into the office and when's the most meaningful time to come into the office, allowing them to create those connections with each other, whether they're in the office or remote, and both within teams and outside of their teams, ensuring that they feel confident that their well-being is a priority, right? Taking into account the needs of leaders and the challenges that they're facing, and being able to set the tone from the top, making sure their leaders have the tools they need to coordinate on-site work with their teams and make sure that their teams are collaborating effectively, and to promote team building amongst their teams. And then the HR leaders that I've been working with really pride themselves on kind of setting that tone and creating the conditions for the culture that they want, right? That to me is really crucial. It's not how can I force people to do what I want, right? It's without forcing, creating a culture and a toolkit to enable the types of things that you want within your company, making sure that aligns with your DEI values and that your hybrid policies aren't leaving a certain group or demographic behind, and of course continuing to provide a healthy and safe workplace.
Yeah, and I would suggest that this does not become another HR project or initiative, because then you sort of excuse away whatever may or may not be working about it, and then it looks more like there's a single ownership entity. This is a collective endeavor, right? Everyone's has shared responsibility to make this type of work condition successful. So yes, leaders set the tone. I mean, if you have a traditionalist leader who says, I need to see people working to know that they're working, well, then if a company has adopted a set of guidelines that give people flexibility, but you've got this one rogue leader who insists otherwise, then that can be corrosive to a reemerging culture for an organization. And that can also limit people's commitment, as we talked about earlier, their willingness to be creative, their sense of feeling trusted, and thus it can also cause people to be less engaged as a company employee as a whole. So that means there does need to be an investment in this, that leaders have to adopt a new language, a revised vocabulary on how they approach setting up a team that can work and be productive remote, and that leaders can be advocates and promoters for this sort of work condition, and then also facilitate ways in which the team can balance working from home and working on site. And I also want to point out what's noted in the human resource section about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that this we're finding, serve as a way that is a bit of a level set, that it's a fully inclusive type of condition that can ensure that no matter who someone is, what they bring about themselves into the workplace, whatever their ethnicity, color, gender, LGBTQ status, this creates a bit more of a leveling condition. So that's another advantage that's emerged.
And hopefully, if you're at a company and you are dealing with one or more leaders who are the skeptical leaders that you mentioned, David, who might be old school and not appreciate this approach, hope you can share this webinar recording with them and show them some of the hard data that proves that people can in fact be productive, even if you're not looking over their shoulder all the time.
Sure. Yeah, this goes beyond just checking a box by hiring someone who looks different. This is a means of, as I mentioned, level setting the organization with people who bring in unique world experiences.
So let's talk about some of the important design principles that go into creating a great hybrid work program. David, what are the things that need to be considered when creating a hybrid work program for your company?
Yeah, I can't help but notice it says add a new policy. Well, in this case, I've suggested to my clients, and they've pointed out to me, that having a policy implies a stake in the ground, this sort of static condition in which we can put real definition around our remote hybrid work condition. But as we've been saying all along, this is evolving. It's redefining itself along the way. So I suggest the notion of guidelines and best practices, and having the necessary tools available so that people can work in these remote settings, and then they can come up with the right practices that work for them. Like the best days, this term anchor days is starting to surface more and more. My anchor days are Tuesdays, Thursdays. That's where you can find me. And then other times I'll come in because I'm meeting with a vendor or a contractor, or my colleagues and I have chosen to come in on a certain day to get something done, or external partners or board members or candidates, right? So there needs to be this allowance for flexibility as conditions present themselves, so that the nature of work has a flexibility. But yeah, having some sort of means of tracking or having a consistent process that they can point to, tools that they can point to. I know this is something that you'll speak to in regards to the ReturnSafe solutions. Those types of new emerging platforms are where I think companies want to take themselves. So all of this can be organized in some sort of useful fashion.
We talked earlier about how important it is to set the conditions for what you want versus forcing what you want on employees. And that's where I've seen a lot of our customers be very successful by giving the employees the tools they need to both know what their options are, but also to coordinate and collaborate with their teammates. David, what are employers and employees looking for most when deciding when and how often they will come into the office?
Yeah, it goes back to one of the earliest things I said. How do we react to the work that presents itself, and how do we act upon it and then move it through our organization? So I'm finding the most successful examples of companies who are getting this right is they're kind of leaving it on a per team basis, right? Teams who collaborate and work together and define themselves as doing shared work handoffs within the team can best determine how they want to set their ground rules. And so as I look at this slide that you provided, they can set their work arrangements, socialize their schedules, and work off of tools that are best in helping them be productive and engaged with each other. But that's what I'm seeing, is that instead of it being a total company definition, it can be a per team definition, and that's more portable, nimble, and speaks to the reality of how work's getting done anyway.
Yeah, and what we found is that if you put the tools in the employees' hands to allow them kind of coordinate with each other and proactively prompt them to socialize their schedules with each other, and get them to agree on what days they might come in the next week, they feel like they're in control. They don't feel like they're being forced, but they're able to get that collaboration that they need when it makes the most sense. I was talking to a customer of mine a few months back, and he said, "Hey, Kurt, I'm in the office today, and no one on my team is here, right? Like, we have this hybrid policy, and everyone loves that, but like, I hate it when I come in and no one else is here." And so a lot of what we've been helping our customers with is just giving them the tools they need, so these people, these employees can socialize their schedules with each other and be encouraged to come in on the days when it matters most without forcing. I was encouraged, but not force. Another consistent theme that I've seen, I know something that you've worked on quite a bit, David, is that the importance of having a robust coaching or mentoring program has become all the more important now that employees maybe remote more and maybe aren't naturally able to form these connections throughout the company that they would have in the past. What do you feel like leaders are doing to create good coaching programs? Are there certain approaches that you're seeing them take to do this successfully in a hybrid environment?
Yeah, I have to say, this is an early stage condition. Companies have been embracing coaching and mentorship methodologies for years. We know that. The progressive companies do this. It's a great way for succession planning and giving people a clear sense of what their pathways can be, and just helping kind of mature the work setting in general by having great coaching and mentoring conditions. But doing that in a remote fashion, I can't point, and I'm engaged with a lot of different companies. I'm sure our listeners out there will be able to point to something where they've been able to figure this out. I'm working with a company right now that does such great work in having a coaching culture, but they're still trying to think through what would that look like in a more pure remote setting that engages people in ways in which they do feel like they're heard, and they do understand what the future looks like for them, and they can grow themselves professionally here. I think there's work to be done in this regard. I like these. These are screenshots of, I guess, the ReturnSafe platform. There just needs to be more of enabling tools to move that along.
Yeah, I mean, we built these functions around connecting employees together for coaching and mentorship based on a lot of the feedback that we're seeing, and just making it easier to implement this type of program. within your organization. Again, in a way that just feels natural for employees and not something that's being forced upon them.
Yeah, makes sense. And it just seems like this is a way people can, again, be productive in every facet of their lives, both at work and not at work.
And of course, another key factor for the folks that are really doing this well is continuing to have a focus on health and safety and being proactive about it. And again, it could be related to the pandemic and making sure people still feel safe when they're coming in. A lot of people at this point, I think, have kind of just thrown up their hands and said, okay, COVID's been around a while. I'm not being as diligent as I was in the past. But there are other employees, there's a significant percentage of people, I think around 40% or so of employees that are still very concerned about this. And so you need to make sure that people feel like they're safe and they're going to not get sick when they come into the office. You need to make sure that you care about their well-being when they're in the office. One of the things that I heard from another a customer of mine recently is that they have people do a quick daily health screening before they come into the office each day. And the reason they do it isn't because they're overly concerned about getting sick. Obviously, they want to protect their employees, but the biggest benefit to them of doing that is actually giving their employees permission to stay home if they have some symptoms. I think historically there's been this huge hero culture at companies where you feel like, I'm sick, I'm going to come in anyway because I'm a great worker and I'm not going to stay home. I'm not going to let that stop me. And just, no, that's not the culture you want anymore, right? You want your employees to know that it's okay if you're not feeling well to stay home, and if you want to work remotely, fantastic, right? But you should make sure that you're giving employees permission to take sick time when they need it, and also making sure that they know that their mental health and well-being is a priority as well. And I think by showing that, you actually can foster a better culture and one where people feel better about the company when they know that you care about their well-being. And the final best practice that we'll hit on here, and I think it ties back to one of the things we mentioned at the beginning around actually measuring how you're doing when it comes to engagement and when it comes to wellness and so forth, is iterating. The customers that I've been working with that are really getting this right aren't just setting it and forgetting it, right? They're constantly looking at the data and using that to adjust what they're doing to make sure that they have an optimal program. And what that means can change over time too, right? It can change based on the conditions of the pandemic, based on what types of work their employees are doing, based on who their employees are. And so making sure that you're getting this data around who's coming in and when, and you're aggregating it and taking into account various factors is all really important. Let me just give you an example. It might be one thing to look at the number of times people badged into the building from your badging system, right? That might give you some data on, oh, hey, we had people coming in. We had 40% of people coming in May, and we had 45% coming in June. Great, and that's useful information. But it becomes even more useful if you look at it alongside the information that you might have in your HRIS system, right? So how do demographics play into this? Are you leaving behind employees that are of a certain gender or a certain background? And you can segment data and look at it by those things to make sure that that you're properly factoring in DEI and that you're making sure that you've built an inclusive program that's not leaving anyone behind. So having that data and that reporting available to you and actually looking at it and taking advantage of it is crucial as well. So just to recap, what are some of the results that companies that are getting this right seeing? Well, what we found is that they're able to attract, develop, and retain the best talent. And in fact, highly engaged employees are 87% less likely to leave their place of work. And that is a huge percentage improvement when you have engaged employees. And one of the biggest costs that companies have to deal with is the cost of attrition, of people leaving. I think it costs something like 2 times a person's salary to hire a replacement in general. So being able to to have this culture where people feel connected and engaged and feel like you care about their well-being pays dividends very, very quickly. It's almost instantaneous ROI by getting this right. As we've talked a lot about, it also allows you to have a productive and engaged culture. And similar to the stat around companies retaining their talent better, well, no surprise, companies are actually 20% more profitable when their employees are properly engaged and productive. And finally, that health and wellness factor, it's just crucial to what people care about when they think about their office. 84% of companies in the survey said that employee health and wellness is very important to them when coming up with their work plan. And finally, when you get it right, you're going to hear great things from your employees, right? You might get better Glassdoor reviews. Some of the things that I've heard from employees that are customers are, I really like working here. I'm able to balance my personal and professional life. My working arrangement is allowing me to perform at a high level. I'm still able to have strong relationships both with my team and with folks across the organization. My company has shown me that they care about my well-being, and that's important to me. And with a good coaching and mentorship program, your employees will know that that you support their career ambitions as well. So ultimately, by putting into place an effective hybrid work plan, you're making sure your employees have a great experience. You're helping them be more productive, and ultimately, you'll be a better place to work. And ultimately, companies that get hybrid work right are going to outperform the ones that don't. And really appreciate you all attending the webinar here with us today. Hope you found it useful. We are here to help you with this, both myself and David as well as an expert and is available to help you out. So I encourage you all, if there's anything that you saw today that you could use our help with, please visit our website, returnsafe.com. You can speak with one of our experts. We have both product as well as consulting services where we can help you get this right. And we're really looking forward to doing so. We also have a hybrid playbook available on our website that gives you some of this information in more detail and allow you to be the coach that's enabling your team's success as you implement your hybrid program. And with that, love to answer some of the questions that have been submitted during today's conversation. All right, we've got a large number of attendees today. So, once again, just really appreciate all the interest and y'all sticking around for the duration of this hour. We've gotten a number of questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get to them all, David, but we'll do our best to answer as many as we can in the time that we have. And we're also going to be,
if I could, Kurt, sorry to interrupt that.
Sure, David.
I do need to drop off at the top of the hour, but I'm certainly available as a friendly ear for those individuals who are in HR or leadership capacities who are trying to think this through. And I know you'll mention this. We talked about it before the webinar, but just apologies in advance. Ironically enough, I'm about to conduct a training for one of my client companies on their new hybrid guidelines, not policy, because they didn't want to put that stake in the ground. They want to make it guidelines as things sort of ebb and flow in this world. So just a heads up that I'll be here for a few minutes and then we'll drop off shortly.
Yeah, no problem. So like I say, we'll get to as many questions as we can, and then the ones we don't get to, we'll be reaching out to you after the fact, and happy to have those conversations offline. And just also happy to talk to any of you in general about your needs in terms of whether you're interested in having further conversations with David, like we're offering here today, as well as anything we could do from a ReturnSafe perspective in terms of giving you tools to make this your programs better for your employees and improve your hybrid experience. So let's jump into the questions here. A lot of folks asked about whether we share the slides. There's a link now in the chat that you can get, and we'll also send those out after the fact, and they'll be available online as well. The next question that we got, make sure I'm starting at the beginning here. We'll do first come, first serve. So what should be included in a hybrid work policy? And David, before I toss this one over to you, because I think you'll be able to answer this best, I do want to just clarify that I think it's really important to distinguish between your working arrangement, right, where you can have different working arrangements for different people, and then your actual like policies. So to me, you might need to have some policies. A policy could be something like, oh, if you are a hybrid employee, you get to expense your internet costs for the month, right? That could be in the policy, but it's really important to distinguish that from someone's working arrangement. And I think using the term arrangement is much better, because it kind of highlights that, hey, this is something you're coming up with your employees that's going to benefit them. But with that said, David, what are your thoughts?
Oh, you gave it a good start, Kurt. Having the practical necessities to run a remote work setting means that people need to have basic capabilities, IT, knowing how to light yourself, creating a safe work environment remotely, the extent to which people may receive some stipend or not for setting up their remote work setting. All these can be incorporated into, say, a policy procedure type of language. But as I noted, I'm advising client companies to make this more of a guideline setting than a hard and fast policy that needs to be followed for everyone in the company, because each team, as we noted, works a bit differently. So they should set up their guidelines that work best for them, and that means they'll be more productive and more flexible to the work conditions.
Yeah, very good. Let's see if we can squeeze in two more questions here at least. So the next one here is, what are some of the metrics that should be used to track a hybrid work program, right? So we talked about how important it is to be engaged and connected within the parameters of hybrid work. But what are you seeing, David, in terms of how companies are actually measuring those things?
Yeah, I touched on this a moment ago, but just to restate the critical things. First, you have established metrics that have to do with how the operations run anyway, and that'll give you a good sense of, are we as productive in this hybrid setting as we were prior to setting up this work arrangement. So those are known metrics for the business and can serve as a good guide. But in addition, as noted, ask. And so create pulse surveys that can touch base on the aspects of the remote policy and practices that are working well and the things that should change. And with that starting point, so that you have stakeholder feedback as well as the known metrics, you've got some pretty good data points that can provide you a dashboard to look at this, say, a quarter or 2 quarters later, to see how you may want to test and learn and change some things up when needed.
Great. Let's wrap up with this one. So we have someone asking, what kind of consulting services do you offer to help get our hybrid program started? So we at ReturnSafe, we have a product that's going to help keep your employees engaged, but we also can help you from a services perspective. On our team, our customer success managers work very closely with our customers and really partner with them to get this right, combining both their learnings from other folks that they work with along with our technology. And then of course we have David here with us as well, who we can help connect you with. As it says on the slide right here, we're able to offer up a free conversation with him if you reach out to us after this webinar. David, anything you'd like to add there, and the types of things you can help with in terms of establishing a good program?
Yeah, I'll just note that having been a former CEO and HR leader for big and small companies and a consultant with hundreds of companies through my firm, I have points of view and perspectives, and that's why this notion of being a friendly ear is a starting point for people. I can sort of empathize with where you are and at least provide points of view and perspectives in that conversation. If I can help further, I'm happy to. And I'm going to drop off here, if I may, Kurt, if you wanted to carry on a bit further. Thanks to everyone for joining us, and I'm happy to reconnect for those who want to extend the conversation further.
Yeah, thank you, David. Good luck with your upcoming session, and really appreciate the time. It was great chatting with you, and really interesting conversation.
Thanks.
So just to wrap things up, folks. Again, thank you for attending. I really would encourage you to take advantage of this this session with David. His time is really valuable, and we're really grateful that he's willing to make himself available to talk with you further. In addition to that, the experts on our team here at ReturnSafe would love to chat with you as well, and talk about how your hybrid program is going. Any ways we think we can help optimize it for you. We've got some fairly turnkey solutions that you can roll out to your employees to help them collaborate and communicate with each other. So we'd be happy to get on a call with you and hear about what you're doing, and show you some of the things in our product that are going to help you out. So once again, just thank everyone for the time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.